Debian and Ubuntu are two of the biggest and hottest Linux distros of all time. While Ubuntu and Debian are closely related, the kind of experience you get from them is very different. In one corner, we have Debian, the rock-solid, community-driven distro known for its stability and security. And in the other corner, we have Ubuntu, the user-friendly, innovation-driven distro that has taken the world by storm. One chooses a stock desktop while the other rocks a heavily customized UI, and the differences go on. But with the release of Debian 12 Bookworm, Debian really ups its game and has become more relevant than ever before. Debian 12 is a huge update that brings a modern desktop, the latest features, and overhauls its entire package repository. And these things make Debian 12 an attractive choice. But the question is it more attractive than Ubuntu 22.04 LTS? So in this video, we'll do a deep dive with Debian 12 and Ubuntu 22.04 and see which of these two is better. Which of these two has faster performance? We'll compare the stability, software choice, the gaming experience, and many more aspects of these two distros and see how they are different from each other. And we'll finally see which of these two is the smarter choice for 2023 and beyond. This is Linux Techs, let's jump right in. Starting off with the user interface, this is where we see big differences between the two, and this can be the decider for many people. Debian 12 pulls a major shocker in the UI department this time around, and that really levels up its game. Debian 12 Bookworm comes with GNOME 43. Now this is the first time in ages that a new version of Debian doesn't look prehistoric. Debian is very conservative in terms of package versions and comes with very well tested and stable packages which tend to be older. We get very old desktop versions which can be major turn-offs for many people. But this time we are getting GNOME 43 out of the box. It may not be the latest, but it definitely is very close to the latest, and that makes Debian 12 look absolutely gorgeous out of the box. We get stock GNOME here and a new wallpaper called Emerald, which I'm gonna change. The desktop feels fresh. The bottom panel, the app grid, and the new status menu with these pills. This is very new to Debian stable. This is also the first time that we see GTK4 and libadwaita apps on Debian. These newer apps look so good here. You can also enable the dark mode here. In both modes, all the applications look very uniform and it feels like they belong here. This brings about that polished feel to the Debian desktop. The desktop is fully stock here and it comes with absolutely zero modifications. The newer 40 series of GNOME desktop has reached that place where you don't feel like anything needs to change here, both from an aesthetic as well as functional points of view. Everything looks good and everything is usable. I really enjoyed using Debian 12. I've been using it for some time now, and in the UI department, it has kept me in that place of contentment. I'm very happy with it. Debian 12 has me thinking if I should switch to it. Will I switch to it? We'll see how I feel by the end of this video, then I'll make my decision. But yeah, I'm getting all the advantages of using Debian stable, and I'm also getting a contemporary and modern version of the GNOME desktop. Now one thing you should notice, during installation, Debian lets you choose the desktop environment that you want to use. You get all the options like KD Plasma, XFC, Cinnamon, and many more. Plasma desktop comes with version number 5.27, which is currently the latest version. GNOME desktop is the default choice, so you have that freedom of choosing something else if GNOME is not something that you want to use. Moving on to the Ubuntu camp, Ubuntu 22.04 Jammy Jellyfish comes with a customized GNOME 42, and this is a purely premium experience. Ubuntu's GNOME looks very different from stock GNOME, and how you use it and work with it is also quite different. Ubuntu gives us a vertical panel based desktop, and this dock here is the central control element of this desktop. Instead of a disappearing dash from stock GNOME, the dash takes a permanent place here. And very honestly, I love Ubuntu's approach. This dock makes launching favorites and switching between apps very quick and convenient. In stock GNOME, you need to invoke the dash first and then click on an icon. Here, you just click on the icon. Apart from this one thing, most things remain the same on both the distros. Windows or the super button behavior is the same, you get the same application drawer and the same workspace picture, the settings, the app behavior, it's all the same. One major difference you will see between Ubuntu and Debian's user interface is the theme. Debian uses GNOME's default Adwaita theme and Ubuntu comes with its own Yaru theme. Now both the themes are very polished. Ubuntu goes for that uniformity in its branding colors and gives us a desktop that screams orange. Everything looks very premium here. In light theme, both Ubuntu and Debian look very good. But as soon as we switch to the dark mode, Ubuntu takes the lead in how impressive it looks. Debian looks great in dark mode with the right wallpaper. Ubuntu on the other hand is a premium rush in dark mode. I adore how it looks here. Both Ubuntu and the new Debian look stunning. Anybody who looks at your screen is going to look again. Both have their own workflows. How you use these systems is slightly different because of this dock in Ubuntu. Now I might like one, you might like the other. Looks are highly subjective, so I'll give both Ubuntu 22.04 and Debian 12 a point each in this department. Older versions of Debian would outright lose a point in the user interface department because the desktop versions lag so much behind the latest. But with this version, Debian developers have included a desktop that's very close to the latest, and this is a genius move by them. Because this one choice makes Debian suddenly more attractive. Ubuntu and Debian may look different from each other, but they are very similar under the hood, and once you fire up a terminal, they both behave very similarly. Having a good knowledge of the Linux commands and being comfortable working with Linux terminal really broadens what you can do with Linux and what kind of experience you get here. So if you're interested in leveling up your Linux game, definitely check out my course Linux Mastery Express, which is the fastest way to learn Linux and start using Linux like a pro. I'll teach you a set of commands that will give you the confidence to use Linux without even a graphical user interface. Then we'll dive deep and learn how to use the V editor and master shell scripting with real life examples. After teaching more than 100 students in person, I've curated this course with the top things that will level up your Linux skills the fastest. So if you're feeling like your Linux game is stuck in the same spot for too long and you're ready to take your Linux skills to the next level quickly, check out the link in the description below and get your Linux Mastery Express. We are running a massive 45% discount right now, so make use of it. Debian and Ubuntu have a very close relationship, but at the same time, they couldn't be farther away from each other. Ubuntu is a Debian-based Linux distro, meaning it derives most of its software packages and components from Debian. But there is a huge difference between Ubuntu 22.04 and Debian 12 because Ubuntu is derived from the unstable branch of Debian. Now hear me out, let's not freak out because I use the word unstable here. Ubuntu takes a snapshot of the Debian unstable branch, and Ubuntu developers do their own research and development on these packages. They use this snapshot as a starting base point to build a new version of Ubuntu. Then, Ubuntu developers add their own modifications and customizations and do many quality assurance tests and create a stable version of Ubuntu. A new version of Ubuntu releases every 6 months, and a new long-term support version of Ubuntu releases every 2 years. Ubuntu 22.04 is one such long-term release, and this will be supported till 2027. Ubuntu long-term support or LTS versions are very reliable systems. They are so dependable that Ubuntu LTS versions are the professional's choice to deploy multi-million-dollar applications worldwide. Yes, Ubuntu is one of the top choices for servers across the globe. So Ubuntu is going to be a very stable and reliable choice for personal computers, students, software developers, businesses, and everywhere else. Debian 12 Bookworm is the latest Debian stable release. The stable in Debian stable stands for stable as a rock. Debian stable is probably the most thoroughly tested and reliable operating system in the world. Currently, there are more than 1,000 official Debian developers and maintainers who make sure we are getting the most dependable computing experience. The Debian unstable branch that we spoke of earlier, packages in there have to finish getting tested and then are moved to the Debian testing branch. These packages undergo extensive unit and integration testing there to finally move to the stable branch. Yeah, there's a lot of testing going on here. And Debian has a fantastic development and testing process that ensures we get an impeccable user experience. A new version of Debian stable comes out every 2 years and is supported for 3 years with ample time for upgrading. Debian developers prioritize stability over everything. They want to give us a system where everything works and the user faces zero problems. To ensure this, a long and thorough testing process becomes inevitable, which can lead to slightly older packages and software versions. While you're not getting decade-old outdated packages, you're not necessarily getting the latest and the newest packages. This is a necessary trade-off to enjoy a problem-free computing. Ubuntu, on the other hand, respects the Debian stability but tries to hit a middle ground between being stable while also trying to give the users modern and more relevant packages. Note that Ubuntu 2 doesn't necessarily provide the latest versions of all the software, but they are newer than Debian, and at times, this can mean newer and improved features. All in all, Ubuntu and Debian both are stability-oriented distros that provide solid computing experiences that you can rely on at any time, any place. Both get a point each in the stability department. One interesting difference between both is, Debian is a fully community-driven project with the people making decisions in every little and big thing. Ubuntu, on the other hand, is a corporation-led project spearheaded by Canonical, but it too is supported by a large community. Now both of these points are big advantages for Debian and Ubuntu respectively, as we'll see in this video. Alright, let's move on to the performance section. Ubuntu 22.04 and Debian 12 impress with their performances. Both systems are optimized to deliver the best throughput across a range of hardware. At times, Debian takes the lead with minute gains, especially in heavier tasks like gaming and rendering. But overall, both the systems are on par with each other as far as the performance is concerned. Both systems are very responsive as well. App opening and switching between multiple apps, it's all fluid, smooth and very enjoyable. One thing to notice, with Ubuntu, you might install many apps as snaps, which do show significantly slower startup times compared to full native .deb applications. Now Debian by default uses .deb packages only. On modern SSDs, you'll not notice this startup time difference, it's mostly negligible. But on older hard disk drives, this difference is heavily pronounced and noticeable. So if you're on Ubuntu, while installing apps, you might want to go with the .deb versions, if you don't have any strong reasons to use the snap version, that is. You can switch between application formats using this drop-down in the software store. On Debian, this is not a thing, as Debian focuses only on its .deb software repository and doesn't come with snaps or flatpaks pre-installed. But yeah, if you want those, you can go ahead and install them yourself. Both Ubuntu and Debian give you the option to install a minimal system that comes with only the bare essentials, and you manually install any software you want. Both these systems provide a butter smooth performance for day-to-day usage, things like browsing, doing some office work, watching movies and stuff. Apart from that, Debian and Ubuntu perform great for gaming and other heavier tasks like compiling and rendering as well. Now if you're interested in building a performance-oriented system, you'll want to install these distros with lightweight desktops like XFCE. Debian provides you the option to use XFCE during installation itself, and Ubuntu has a lightweight variant called Ubuntu. Using these makes a noticeably huge difference in the general responsiveness of the system. In the performance section, Ubuntu 22.04 and Debian 12 give a very similar mileage, so they both get a point each in this section. Moving on to the software department, this is where we see some crucial differences between Ubuntu 22.04 and Debian 12. These differences exist even after the fact that Ubuntu and Debian use the same package manager and pretty much the same packages. Alright, let's get into it. Debian has its software repositories from which we'll be installing all the software we need. It contains around 60,000 packages. These packages have been recently updated. Pretty much any software you want can be installed here directly from the software store or the Synaptic package manager. All these software packages have undergone extensive testing and ensure that everything works with this system. I personally find Debian very convenient, as 90% of all the software I need are available here for me. For the other 10%, I generally need to download from the software vendors directly. Ubuntu too has a very similar software repository setup, and you can directly download and install anything you want quickly from the software store or using the apt command. But in addition to these packages, Ubuntu brings its newer Snap packages. Snap is a modern unified package format created by Ubuntu. While snaps do tend to invoke a strongly mixed reaction from the Linux community, they are nevertheless hugely successful right now. With snaps, the software library available to you becomes so much bigger. You get access to many new software that were previously unavailable on Linux. With snaps, Ubuntu had aimed to make it attractive for software vendors to bring their products to Linux. Right now, Google, Microsoft, Nextcloud, and many more software vendors, big and small alike, are jumping on this bandwagon. Just browse around in the Snapcraft store or the software store in Ubuntu and you'll see that the software store is populated with many high quality apps. I've started using snaps and I've found some really cool applications here. Snaps really make Ubuntu more alive. But for people who don't prefer to use unified packages like snaps and flatpaks and would rather use full native packages, Debian is one of the few high quality options today. You can go ahead and install snaps or even flatpaks here, but by default they are not installed and you enjoy the good old .deb packages and get to see the beauty of harmonious package management that many of us oldies fell in love with. Even today, I prefer to use full native .deb packages as they are faster, take up way less storage space, and generally create a harmonious system. But I've grown to depend on few Snap apps and I'm thankful they exist. Snaps do have their undeniable advantages. So snaps take the software availability point home for Ubuntu. The Debian software repositories contain pretty much everything you need. The same goes for Ubuntu software repositories. That will be good enough for most people. But snaps bring in a lot more which cannot be ignored. There are too many rich apps here that are going to take your Linux experience to the next level. so Ubuntu wins this round. Just remember, you can install snaps on Debian very easily. Instructions are given in the description below. Gaming on Linux has taken off and is growing at a staggering rate. Just a few years ago, for anybody wanting to do some serious gaming, dual booting with Windows was the only viable option, or else you'd have to tinker around with Wine, which was a hit or miss. Now, using Proton, which is a software based on Wine, you can play thousands of Windows exclusives directly on Linux. There are also a good number of Linux native games now. But still, a huge number of great games are not available on Linux natively. Proton solves this issue. Proton adds a compatibility layer for Windows games to run on Linux. It's not emulation like VirtualBox, so the performance is great here. In fact, certain games perform better on Linux than they do on Windows, on the same hardware. I highly recommend Steam to use Proton. Enable Steam Play in the Steam settings and you'll be able to install Windows games on Linux just like you'd install a Linux game, with a single click that is. You don't need to do any tweaking to get them running, they run when you open the game. Steam is the most convenient and hassle-free way of gaming on Linux. If you have your own games or discs, I highly recommend you check out this new application called Bottles. Bottles lets you easily download and configure Wine, Proton and Soda prefixes for your games. This makes things simpler and even Linux newcomers can get gaming without too much tinkering around. Bottles is highly recommended if you have your own games. Both Ubuntu and Debian are excellent platforms for gaming. They have great driver support, have large user bases, and generally, games are tested on Ubuntu. While bleeding edge distros like Arch and Manjaro are in a lot of hype nowadays for Linux gaming, I do recommend both Ubuntu and Debian. Bottles and Steam give you the option to select from a range of version numbers of Proton and Soda, including the latest versions. These are not handled by the distro package manager but by Steam and Bottles, so you have access to the latest versions of these tools even on Ubuntu and Debian. Check out ProtonDB to get an idea of which Windows games run fine with Proton on Linux and to get improvement recommendations. Big names like GTA 5, Cyberpunk 2077, Apex Legends, Red Dead Redemption 2, and many more run perfectly fine with Proton on Linux. As far as gaming on Linux is concerned, we have arrived. Both Ubuntu and Debian get a point each in the gaming department. Getting started with both Debian and Ubuntu is fairly simple. Both offer graphical installers that install and get you started with respective distros in below 25 minutes. Ubuntu is the simplest of both. Its installer is very intuitive and one of the most beginner-friendly ones we have. That's one of the reasons why Ubuntu is recommended for Linux newcomers. Pretty much anybody can install Linux with Ubuntu. Debian on the other hand has a slightly sophisticated installer. It's designed to look more like something that a system admin would use. It provides more control over your installation as this level of control is required by software professionals. At the same time, it can be intimidating to new users with certain options. But if you take it one step at a time, it's easy to install. So if you're installing Debian for the first time, you can follow through a YouTube video. If you don't understand anything, don't panic and just Google it. Ubuntu really shines in this matter as all the steps and options are very easy to understand and are represented in a very beginner-friendly way. The number of steps is also kept very low. Both systems are immediately usable out of the box without you needing to set up too many things. But if you want to get the most out of these systems, check out my video of the top 20 things you must do after installing Ubuntu or Debian. Talking about the drivers, AMD and Intel integrated graphics drivers are pre-installed on both distros. NVIDIA proprietary driver installation is done automatically on Ubuntu 22.04, but on Debian, you'll need to manually install these drivers. Instructions for the same are given in the description below. In the installation and setup section, Ubuntu wins a well-earned point. Debian installation is not difficult per se, it's easy, but Ubuntu sets the bar very high when the ease of installing a Linux distribution is concerned. Whichever of these two distros you choose, you won't be alone on this journey. Both Ubuntu and Debian have large and friendly communities. Any problems or issues you face, or you need any help regarding how to do something, you can find help online very easily. Because both of these distros have large communities, solutions to most problems are already addressed. So if you have any issues, solutions are just a Google search away. Even if you have a problem that is not already answered, Ubuntu and Debian's communities prove to be very helpful in sorting it out. Ubuntu's and Debian's communities are one of the biggest strengths of these distros, and these communities make these distros enjoyable for everybody. I salute all the volunteers for making these distros graspable for people who are new to them. Both get a point each in this section. At the end of the day, Debian is made for certain people and Ubuntu is made for certain people. At this point in my deep research and comparison, I agree that Ubuntu improves many things that it takes from Debian. There are many Linux distros that are essentially clones of their parent distros with different desktops slapped on. But Ubuntu is far from that. Ubuntu takes a phenomenal base, does great work on top of it, and produces something that is just remarkable. Ubuntu is the de facto Linux distro today. For most people, Ubuntu will be the perfect choice. It will satisfy most use cases perfectly. So does that mean Debian is just an instrument in the success and glory of Ubuntu? Not at all. Debian is a great and boring Linux distro. Yeah, you heard that right. Boring. Debian is boring, predictable, and pretty much the same with every new update. Now my younger audience won't understand what I'm saying, but boring, predictable, and constant is a big selling point for many people, including me. Many of us want a fully functional system that doesn't bother with repeated updates, a system where even if something isn't new, everything works, a system that doesn't change repeatedly. One morning, I don't want to wake up and see my application menu completely changed. A system that gives me a stable working platform and just be there. When I say these words, Linux Mint comes to my mind, and that is an example of a highly successful distro, all because of the same reasons. So for us, who want to just get some work done, Debian can be the perfect companion. Having said that, my personal point still goes to Ubuntu today, because as a complete package, Ubuntu is quite exceptional and unbeatable really. And by the total tally of points, Ubuntu wins by a compelling margin today. And to the final question. Will I be switching my main Linux distro today? I've been using Ubuntu 22.0 for LTS for a long time now. Recently, I've been playing around with Debian 12 a lot, and I'm going to give it a shot. So yeah, I'll be replacing Ubuntu with Debian 12 on my main system, and I'm hopeful about a great journey ahead. Alright, if you're interested in learning Linux and leveling up, check out my course Linux Mastery Express, which is the fastest way to learn a powerful set of commands, how to use the V-editor, and get a working knowledge of shell scripting in a very short amount of time. I've curated this course to be the fastest way to learn Linux, so check that out. Next up, check out the top 20 things you must do after installing Debian 12. I've got some really cool things there, so don't miss that. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel and leave me a big thumbs up. If you absolutely loved the video, do let me know in the comments below. Alright, this is the Linux Techs, signing out.